What I have in the packet for the commissioners are the previous briefing documents in regards to the budget. And on December 12th, we had talked about increasing the sheriff's budget by $245,000, as well as increasing traffic policing and a couple of other items, so that we settled on a budget of $36,686,203. And then we asked all of the departments to send information to me in regards to how they would meet these budgeted expenditure dollars. And then over the weekend, I went through and updated the budget for reconciliation against transfers in and outs, and reconciliation for indirect charges, and applied the indirects, and made an adjustment for ER&R charges, and a number of the last-minute auditing or compliance checks that we do for the budget. And in that process, I realized that the sheriff's office was still in their budget of $1,082,000 in revenue, had $150,000 of mental health tax fund transfers that was not approved by the commission and was not authorized by the mental health tax fund. So I removed that $150,000 from the revenue. And when I was chewing up the property tax estimate in the treasurer's revenue to the actual certification of levy that we're going to pass tomorrow for dollars, there was about $140,000 worth of new construction that was added to the that needs to be added to the treasurer's revenue receipts, which I added into as well. I had another document here. I just handed out my notes. Does anybody have your notes on the bottom of their page? No? Uh-oh. Give me 1 second. Okay, I'll work off the memory. So, those were the revenue adjustments that occurred. On the expenditure side, I reduced some of the department's budgeted expenditures because ER&R had come forth with a revised ER&R charge. So some of them are a couple of $1,000s less in expenditure because those revenues were used to increase ending fund balance. In addition, I also calculated the indirects for the county, and we are using a different methodology this year for the indirect. Last year, the state auditor, the CPA, the outside firm that works with the auditor's office, had worked with the county to develop a new internal cost allocation plan. Those are calculations that are made to allocate dollars between general funds and the general fund and grants for federal purposes. The cost of administrative services within that grant. Previously, we had used a mechanism that based those calculations on salaries and benefits alone. A more accurate mechanism is to use actual transaction activity In other words, what we're trying to do is to take the dollars that it costs the treasurer, for instance, to offer services to the mental health tax. We used salaries to estimate what those costs to the mental health tax were from the treasurer. We added that to the costs for the auditor's office. We added that for depreciation costs and so forth. So we came up with a rate based on salaries and used that to spread indirect costs. The new mechanism uses the actual transaction activity. In other words, how many payroll entries did we process? How many journals did the auditor, remittances did the auditor pay? How many receipts did the treasurer actually transact for that department? And used a different mechanism, as well as we added to that the cost of the human resources and allocated those into those departments. We increased the cost allocated by adding the risk pool, or the risk costs. We included the commissioner's cost. We included the operations, central operations costs. And so that increased, in some cases, the indirect charge to all of the departments. And what we also did was, now that it's not salary-based, every fund that is in some way supported by the general fund gets charged an allocation for indirect. So in some cases, there were departments that were carrying the material load of the indirect, which is now being spread over a much larger pool of special funds. So almost all special funds are being charged, as well as a larger component of what was in the indirect pool is also being charged. So with that, that generated some additional revenue for current expense. And what that brought was, and this is the final document, a budget up to $36,930,000. I'm sorry, $931,000. And it generated roughly about $190 extra, $1,000 into ending fund balance. I got a mail from Cindy Tickner this morning that her ER&R rate is going to need to be adjusted based on what is in her case a higher indirect charge. And I know she's working on recalculating that. So that will take up roughly about $50,000 of the $190,000, but at least of $100,000 to $110,000 will drop to the bottom line, increasing our ending fund balance.
Plus the new construction?
No, the new construction, so the question there is, do you want to apply the new construction to offset the $150,000 that's not in the sheriff's office budget salary for revenue? And if you do, then no, the new construction is not added. It's probably not fair. So if you want to apply the $140,000 to the $150,000 that's not in the sheriff's revenue, then they offset. If you don't want to offset that, then the 140 does go to ending fund balance. And what I mean by that is, if you don't want to offset the $150,000, then the amount of their reduction, the amount of their budget needs to go down, the $150,000.
Right. So the revenues were in their request of $150,000 of
local mental health tax.
tax. But I don't know that that showed up anywhere in the expenditures.
It was part of their expenditures. And when I spoke to Kevin this morning, honestly, that's what he was going to use to supplement either the training in his staff or the increase in the nursing.
I talking in circles all of a sudden again. Okay, so they want to take the nursing and increase it another $150,000 or do training.
That was,
So the $150,000 coming from the VHO, I mean, talking in circles, or from the
So-
VHO,
is being used to increase nursing.
to increase or to take that 500K and have 150 of it be non.
No, that would increase it from the 350 to the 500.
To the 500, okay. And
The
that's
350, which was last year's budget, this year's budget in prelim was 500.
Okay. Which is going to be paid for by.
Now by BHO.
Okay, so the next 150 of local tax
Correct.
is also somewhere in the expenditure line?
Yes.
Where?
The next 150 for the mental health tax.
The local mental health tax, $150 was put into the supplement to the budget request as a revenue. Where is it put in the expenditure?
It would go into the jail, either piggyback on the nursing.
No, but it should be in the budget
Right.
now, in your budget
I-
request now. And I'm asking, if we assume $150,000 is not going to be granted for the local tax to be spent in the jail, and if we just reduce, and it should be a wash, because this is a new program. Am I correct in thinking
Right.
that? Okay. So my thought is if the commission wants to wait until we see a program like we spoke with this morning, to just,
So we could look at that after the new year. That's what was discussed this morning, you're correct.
so subtract $150,000 worth of revenue, transfer in from mental health, and then reduce the expenditure budget by $150K, and it should be a wash. It should be a wash, because that's a new program. And I'm hoping that the sheriff's office is in agreement with the way I'm looking at this.
Well, I guess the contract for nursing and mental health was for 500, but only 350 was budgeted last year, which means we had to come up with the other 150 to cover that out of the rest of our budget. What we were originally asking is this would bring that nursing and mental health up to the 500 and then use the BHO for the training of the staff to get all that MHP training done, et cetera. So that's what we were looking for the additional on.
The one for the nursing already stays in. Talking about the other one for the training, of not being in the budget any longer and having that discussion later in the year, we'll figure out whether it can actually be used for that.
Well,
Is that what you're saying, Commissioner?
Right, but he's doing it exactly opposite of how we
Okay.
had been discussing.
So the ultimate goal here is to make the nursing and mental health capabilities in the jail whole at 500. If we have to come back with BHO money and give you a line-by-line cost of what it would take to train the remaining staff in the mental health.
If I may,
Okay.
BHO is right now used to pay for the 150 in nursing. Mental health tax transfer, which has not been approved, would need to be a supplement next year to say to mental health, can I transfer $150,000 into the jail to cover these training programs required to bring our staff up to standards in mental health?
Either way, it accomplishes the ultimate goal.
The problem is how the mental health tax dollars can be used. There's lots of strings on that, and restrictions and limitations.
Then what I would say, go that route, allow staff to go back, look at the remaining training needs of our staff, at to what level, and we'll probably come in at even less than that anyway. is the way it looks like. So if that's the pleasure of the board, that works fine because it accomplishes what we're trying to get to.
And I think we need to, I've been trying to have a lot of conversation with the behavioral health organization about the appropriate use of those monies as well. And I think that our chief Eric needs to know and understand medications are not,
No, I mean, she has, a lot of that was understood.
and that before we start thinking about how to use that money, that there'll be good conversation with the behavioral health organization, and it is a reimbursable.
Yeah, no, that's fine, as long as we end up getting to the end game, which is taking care of the people already in and providing the training of those who are about to come in. That works.
So how does the
Subtract-
commission,
Yeah, subtract 150K out of expenditures, because if that was assumed to be made by those revenues, those aren't coming in, of the local tax, is what, if it's in the expenditure budget, then we can take out the 150 of local tax and then supplement it next year once there's been an approved program.
if I may, at the time you guys were preparing a budget, the 150 from the mental health was requested to pay for the increase in the nursing program. So there was no other
Okay,
training program that they had in their program at that point in time.
okay,
Because we were only talking about the one
okay.
$150,000 increase.
Thanks.
So I just wanted to, so that we're all clear on that.
But the other 150 is somehow in here, you said.
We did approve the 150 from the BHO to do what the 150 from the mental health tax was supposed to do, which is to increase the cost for nursing, to cover the increase of the cost for nursing.
It makes sense to me to have that tax, because that's probably the easiest one for us to keep track of. Go for the nursing. Is that within the parameters of that tax? To use it for nursing and mental
That,
health?
I don't know.
And I think that's where we're having the conversation is the BHO, the 150 that's there now for the BHO has a lot more flexibility.
Oh, that one has a lot more
Right,
flexibility.
is that the way? Or
I thought it was the other way.
I think both of them have their,
Limitations.
Well, right, I mean, you can
It
use
has to be
it
around,
but we have not checked into the legal use of the local tax. And as
For
long as we know
training.
in the jail, that the jail staff and Chief Eric know, there's also gonna be some restrictions on the use of the money.
I guess that's what I was getting at, is if we're going to do it, it would make sense that the mental health tax be used for for this, because it would seem that that's a no-brainer, that it should be able to fit within that parameter.
It's not a no-brainer.
If there isn't to use it for nursing for mental health?
As long as it's in services themselves. I don't know.
I think
There's a
what-
non-supplant piece of, it says there's not, you can't supplant certain services with this tax money. And so without knowing what exactly will be used,
But you can expand it, they're expanding from 350 to 500,000, is what I
No.
understood. No, that's what he's saying, yes.
The portion of treatment through the nursing services, about, of that $500,000 contract, 150 goes directly towards mental health services and assessments inside the jail. And that's why we went to the 150 to get it to 500, because that money is in direct support of mental health services inside the jail. It's not for, programs or training, it's actually to offset those people on the intakes and triage of those in crisis,
I don't
on the
think
intakes, et cetera.
we need to ask somebody else a question. You seem concerned.
I think, I have, my concern is, I think Commissioner Drexler has the same concern, is that if the program is already being paid for in any way, you can't take money from that and go somewhere else and supplant it with BHO funding.
No, but can you expand it with the?
But if it's already at that level of service, then it's not expansion.
It wasn't though, it was 150,000 less.
Well,
301,000
that's my
was
question, is
what it
the supplantation language in that is, you need to look at.
well, there's no supplanting, period.
Had nothing to do with this, supplant. Usually for me, I had nothing to do with this.
I think either one is complicated. We already know we have, if the 150,000 is not from the behavioral health organization, as opposed to the treatment tax of Mason County, if the behavioral health organization monies is not used here, then we've got, again, another $150,000 to figure out what to do with. I'm more comfortable there than I am taking the local tax and putting it here. Because then we still have another
I'm good with that,
150,000.
if you believe that that will be easier to
I don't think
use.
there's neither of them have been fleshed out well enough to know.
Didn't at one point you have a conversation around the 150 from the BHO for pretrial services?
I did.
Okay, so what would be the nexus there? I mean, I think that there would be a clearer nexus between increasing mental health capacity in the jail than unless.
Mental health nursing.
Right.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Well, my question was initially we had a conversation around pretrial services and this $150,000. And then the conversation shifted to increasing the mental health nursing capabilities in the jail.
Right.
So are you less comfortable, is there something that you've learned from when you brought forward the 150 with the pretrial
Yes,
services
this
in mind?
commission didn't want to start up a new program where it was potentially a one-and-done revenue source.
But I'm saying, what's the nexus with, why is it an easier leap for pretrial services?
We don't have that program now. It's a
Yeah,
brand new program.
that's why I have my concerns, because of the concerns you told us, that we may not be able to use that money for this. But if you're the one that serves on these committees, you do a lot of hard work on this, and I will follow your lead on this one. If you think that that one is the best one to use this on, then I'm going to support that. I'm not gonna start in front of you, because you've done your work in comparison. I'm basing mine on the other being easier to use because of the conversations you've had here with us about how hard it is to make sure that that money is spent a specific way.
Okay, and I just want to make sure, I mean, I've just heard Chief Eric say things about how much money goes out on mental health services that wouldn't be eligible costs for this. Medications is one. Transportation is probably not one. I think it's very important that the jail staff know that this is for treatment,
training?
counseling.
Well, that's a different conversation. Let's stay with this first one first.
Right.
On the treatment aspect, do you believe that the expansion of the nursing services for mental health in that jail will fit within that perimeter of the behavioral health officer?
I do.
Then that's where we need to put that.
As long as they know, they
It's
also
so weird
are.
that I'm sitting here the one trying to defend spending that money because I'm not a big fan of that, but at the same time just trying to make it right.
As long as that staff
And
is
currently,
aware
that
as well.
currently exists. The problem is that within the sheriff's office budget, there was this other $150,000 transfer in
For training.
expectation for training, which currently does not occur and would not be of any supplanting, because that would be an entirely new program.
We have to also make sure that it's part of the allowed uses that are in the state law.
Within
One of the
utilization of those.
One of the benefits of taking it out now and having that discussion later with that, and just go ahead and go with your original gut feeling on this, is that will be money in, money out. It won't be affecting our ending fund balance for a conversation partway through the year. It won't be, it'll be special funds coming, from another department. So it won't interfere with how we are with our supplementals, is what I'm saying. It would be within,
Would be true supplemental, revenue in, expenditures
Yeah.
out.
which is a lot more flexible on those.
So we had the additional $140,000 in revenue coming from new construction and levy certification.
If it doesn't have to be spent, it needs to stay in there, guys. We need to,
I agree.
but we start building. I'm gonna be going along with you guys to try and keep this all together, but I still think that my original idea of 35.5 million, we should be, so we can put all the rest back in. But I understand what we're doing. But even a little bit of 140, we need to keep there at the bottom, everything we can.
So then there's the additional roughly about $110,000 to $130,000 in additional net indirect recovery dollars that are sitting there as well.
That's after you've made everybody whole that this is effective.
Correct.
Again, I asked that you consider putting that at the bottom.
And so in this budget that you have, the last page in front of you, that does not include the $140,000 worth of new construction in ending fund balance, but it does include the additional indirect revenue. So if you take the $150,000 and reduce the sheriff's budget by that $150,000, that would also drop to ending fund balance.
So we'd be adding an additional 300,000 to ending fund balance.
From what was originally.
I'm roughly, so instead of, it'd be 3.3 million.
Correct.
It's better than 3, because we should be at 3 point, I thought our minimum was supposed to be right at 3.3 for the minimum, wasn't it? Yeah, so
3.3 is the minimum.
why are we budgeted, well, we won't be if we take this and put it at the bottom line.
Correct.
Well, we should be budgeted to 3 million if the bare minimum was, because if we got down to $170,000 and we had 3.3 scheduled last year, we're not gonna make it this year.
Frank, as to district court revenue, why has not that been reduced as I've indicated it must be? And if we are one staff less, I will not be handling traffic infractions. We will not be bringing in a significant amount of revenue because I simply will not have the staff to process those hearings.
Because I haven't gotten to line 9.
Okay. I would
So
prefer-
there were two
I would
other
prefer to
questions.
maintain- I would prefer to maintain the full expenditures that we need to maintain the staff, which are far less than the revenue that we're going to lose by not having the staff.
So, if you want to discuss that, there was the email that came from district court in regards to her concern that the revenues generated by her staff with one less staff person will be reduced by an estimate of about $250,000.
Approximately 250. You won't see it in the first month or two because we'll be collecting the money from the hearings from prior months. As soon as word gets out, district court doesn't have the staff to process infractions. More people are gonna request infraction hearings, so we're not gonna get them set in time.
Can
They
you
will
remind me
be
what the
dismissed.
amount was, 82,000 to replace that staff person?
I believe that's pretty close, right.
That's my recollection as well. Oh, here.
And we lose a lot more revenue,
There's
almost 3 times.
83,600.
And it's not something that I want to do. I mean, I feel I have a duty to uphold all of the laws, but with the priorities and the staffing levels reduced, I won't be able to. And that does have an immediate, well, like I say, it may be 2 months down the road before the impact is actually seen, but it does have a significant impact on the revenue. And that's a real concern of mine. I'm not able to do my job without the full, and as I said, I'm not full staffed, I'm still below the staff that I need, but we're compromising.
Any thoughts there?
No, not really. I mean, it kind of is what it is there. Commissioner?
Yeah, I have a lot. You know, as we've gone through this stuff, we've never held anybody accountable for the revenues as well. And because of that, we've paid over and over for that, the fact that we don't. And there are choices that are made, as we've had with the sheriff's department on Swift and Certain and things like that. There's decisions that are made and we end up dealing with it. This is a decision that the court will make, and we will deal with it or we won't. The truth of the matter, every single department has the same issue. And I don't know what to say, Your Honor, because the truth is, they all have that same claim. You know, and it would be, if you decided to do nothing, that's another threat that we get from everybody else, but I don't know what to do about it except for to say, you know, we don't have the money for everybody to be made whole.
But the problem is you're going to be putting me in a position where I'm not going to be able to enforce the traffic laws and the fines, and we're not going to be collecting the revenue. We'll still be getting old revenue from the past, but any new tickets that come in will not be processed. And that will affect next year, it'll affect the following year. It has a reverberation there. And it's not one of these empty promises, it's a reality. I don't have the staff to do all that needs to be done, and that's a public safety issue. I mean, Sheriff, I think, can back me when the public hears that district court's not enforcing the traffic tickets or not processing them, then the public's gonna, there's always going to be a significant portion of the public who will follow the law no matter what. Most people are law abiding. But there's going to be a larger group who say, hey, it doesn't really matter, don't care, right?
Just like when I find out the jail's full.
And it's not just the sheriff's department that enforces traffic laws. Washington State Patrol does the vast majority of the traffic tickets. And it becomes a public safety issue.
So I'm inclined to agree with the district court judge. Be willing to take those revenues. They seem to me that they are part of the ongoing revenue assumptions, as opposed to one time, which makes it more comfortable to add that back in.
I'm sorry, what revenues? The
The indirect cost and/or the new construction.
I got you, okay.
I'm not sure which one we're talking about at this point.
That would be the same, roughly the same dollars.
Yeah.
But in her articulation, the 250 is a standard revenue stream that might be in jeopardy going forward. Which would create further impacts in the future.
In the same vein, we're gonna have the same issue with the treasurer's office. Losing the staff person leaves me without the ability to collect on delinquent property tax.
And the auditor's office, if she decides she's not gonna be doing
Absolutely right.
the licensing anymore, she has expressed it. That's my point.
In my opinion.
There's something that's happened that we change those numbers. We still need to be back to that, to our very minimum though. And so you're gonna need some more revenue. Somewhere, whether it's a shift or something.
So you already accounted for the increased revenues of the new construction
Yes.
and brought it down to the bottom line of the.
Well, let me rephrase that. I already accounted for it by leaving the 150,000 in the sheriff's office expenditures. So if you're going to remove 150,000 from the sheriff's office expenditures, that adds another 150 to the bottom ending fund balance. So
Are they
you have
gonna,
about,
are they gonna give us that money without expenditure? Without a plan to expend it out?
That's why I'm saying there's 150 is being reduced from the revenue, and either we keep the sheriff's office expenditures the same, in which case
Or you-
140 for new construction is being used to keep the sheriff's budget the same, or you reduce the sheriff's office and the 150 becomes part of ending fund balance.
For the conversation after the new year.
Correct.
But it's not real money in the ending fund balance, I guess what I'm saying, that's just,
No, it is. It would, if you apply, if you,
but if we know we're going to spend it, then it's not.
I think your answer was no. It should have been no to him.
okay, I can try to follow it, but, no.
This is not the conversation for the new year.
Right.
Yeah, this isn't that 150. Okay, now I got it. No, this is not that 150.
Okay, so that 140's spent. So now we have the other
50 roughly.
150 roughly of indirect cost revenues.
Correct.
That was gonna go down to
Ending fund balance.
ending fund balance.
Frank, can I interject here, because I have a question? I just briefly reviewed the indirects that you sent out, but there are some funds on there, like the bond funds, that are just clearing account funds that are now
They were
being,
not, they weren't charged.
but you're asking page had
Not
revenue,
for
oh.
those.
Okay.
Frank,
Yeah,
what
not for those.
is, what is our ending fund balance supposed to be by our resolution that's already been set at the 9%? Or is it 9.5%? What was the last resolution, even though we agreed?
12%.
No, that was our last resolution, but I mean,
The one prior to that.
9%.
9 is the lowest.
9 is the lowest for 2017, and 2018 is 12%.
So that's 3,035,000 is 9%. Now, remember, this is starting with the $3,061,000 beginning fund balance. And without a 13th month, that's probably low
they're
estimate.
saying, no, they're not counting any of that.
But we're saying we're not counting any of that. So
So are you saying no?
1,000,002 is, 12% is about $4 million.
I'm sorry, can you,
12% is $4 million.
which we have 5 years.
We have
to get
5
a 5-year
years.
window
Correct.
to get to 12 to 15%.
Right. So in this budget, 3 million, just over $3 million is 9%. And just over $4 million hypothetically would be the 12%.
What did we have, do you remember what we had scheduled for last year? Was it 3.3, 3.4?
3.4, but it was a much higher expenditure budget.
As you can see, I'm very concerned that we're gonna be in a position setting the budget this year than we were last year with our cash on hand. And she's saying the only difference, Your Honor, you're saying the only difference was 85,000?
83.6, I believe.
So you're not even talking the 140 or anyway, you're talking part of it.
I think Patsy reduced that a little bit for you by trying to squeeze her belt a little bit more on the operating, didn't she? Reduce, I don't know, like 2,000 or 3,000. I mean, it's not
I
a
don't-
significant
I don't
amount,
recall,
but it's,
honestly.
yeah,
The last 4 days have been a blur.
I imagine.
Well, you know, certainly appreciate the sentiment around the ending fund balance, and I think, it's been a large part of the issue here, this year, for sure. I guess if I were to play devil's advocate and try to hash the policy out a little bit more, what would happen without the $250,000 revenue? And I think if there is a reason to concede this point to the court, it would be that.
I don't disagree with that argument, but as I was saying, that argument is the same every single place you go. How much was it that the auditor told us? I think it was pretty close to $200,000 as well. The sheriff in the past was concerned $400,000. At one point it was $750,000. Eventually, we need to hold those departments accountable for the revenue they put forward, and they have to make decisions that based on how to bring some of that money in. Or not.
The courts are not expected to fund the courts. In fact, the reverse is true. The commissioners are expected to adequately fund the courts. If the courts brought zero in, the commissioners would still be required to fund them. And I think that I've demonstrated over the last 23 years an outstanding rapport with the commissioners and commitment to the community. And we have brought the revenue in. We have been within our budget in terms of the expenditures every year.
Yeah.
The few times that we've come in for supplementals, I don't even think we actually had to follow through with those because we were able to work it out. With the requested budget that the court has made, and I think it's 62,000 difference, but I'm not positive of that. That's only 2.27% of the total budget. We have been responsible to the community and to the commission.
If I can, now you sparked the number, it is around 62,000, because Patsy was able to make some other adjustments. Now I recall that number. That is the difference. I think it was 62,721 or something like that.
There's 61,984 is the number I've got written down here.
So that's the amount that would have to be adjusted, not the full 140.
Right. I'm 20% more relieved now.
It's more like 25.
Yeah. It's just math.
So do I have two?
Well, I think if you're gonna use it, that would be one place that I would put it.
Then the final question that I had that was brought forward just a little while back was another supplement to revenue, and this is from the sheriff's office. They're looking to, as I understand, increase their revenues by $80,000 for school, from the school districts to cover.
One school district.
One school district?
North Mason School District.
To cover one of the cost of one of their school deputies, resource deputies. If the revenue comes in, does that get applied to increasing their budget?
Are they hiring a new person or supplementing what they have?
We'll just be moving one person into that position.
We have a soft agreement with Dana Rosenbaugh in North Mason School District. She has a quadri-annual budget, and she has given us, we haven't had time to work up a written agreement yet, but she wants a full-time deputy there at the school. So she is committed to $80,000 over the next 4 years.
A year, each year.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
80 each year over a 4-year period.
Thank you.
I would wholeheartedly support that. I think it's it's a need that shows another good partnership between the county and another entity, so.
But is that a supplemental once that contract is assigned, or are you looking to expend that now?
I see that as a supplemental, so I agree that it's a good partnership, but I see that as more of a supplemental because there's a lot of things that need to be hashed out.
And do we have the contract now?
No, we've got the meeting set up. We only had the discussion early in the week, and we have a meeting set up to draft up a contract.
So that would be similar to the the mental health tax for training. Okay, supplemental. I think we're close. So I have one final adjustment that I'm waiting for from Cindy in the ER&R rate recalculation, which will bring some additional expenditure into the county, but that's at least included in here in the, in this budget.
There'll be additional revenue, you said? Or
No, it'll be additional expenditure that will utilize some of that $140,000, I'm sorry, $190,000 of additional indirect.
That's what you're talking about earlier, about 40 or 50,000.
By costing somewhere around 40 or 50 on the high end. I'm expecting it to be closer to 30, 35, but all of that net would drop into the ending fund balance. So change is to add the amount to the district court for the reduction that was finally asked for, and I'll confirm what that number is, $63,000. Leave the $140,000 of additional new construction revenue in the treasurer's revenue, deduct from the sheriff's office $150,000 in expenditures. Or actually increase into the sheriff's office. I'm sorry, I said it right for deduct from the sheriff's expenditures $150,000.
And revenue in, because they'll be looking at that, doing that next year.
Correct.
There's no 150 revenue.
Because they'll be looking at that as a supplement for next year.
No, the VHM money is revenue.
That's already in there. That's already in there.
Deduct the 150.
Okay. So I will have a budget for adoption tomorrow morning.
We'll be here.
Frank, I have a question. So are you going to adjust public, so with the new indirects, which impacts roads another 100 and some thousand, and then ER&R, are you going to go in and adjust the ER&R rates for roads
You
also?
said you were going to.
But are you going to change it in the budgets?
Correct.
I can do it in ER&R, so
Yeah.
you're going to go into roads budget and change ER&R and the additional 100,000 you're charging roads in indirects, correct? So you're going to
That's
make
already
those,
been done.
do we have that?
The roads indirects. Yes, that's already been done.
Oh,
The-
I'm sorry, I haven't seen that.
But that's already been done. What I need is the ER&R reduction or the increase for current expense and roads.
And utilities.
Correct.
I mean, everybody's right. That's everybody's budget's affected by this.
Yes. And all of the adjustments that were made in the reduction have already been put in, reduced for ER&R. And now with the increase, those will be adjusted as well.
Okay, so you're going to go in to roads budget and you're going to change the ER&R amount in there, and you're going to change the indirect, or you have?
The indirect is already changed.
Okay, so,
But now with the ER&R changing, yes, I'll make that change as well.
okay, and then I guess.
for utilities and all ER&R.
But on the general fund side, anything that was affecting the other departments will be used up within the 140.
Correct.
Yeah. Casey, everything that affects the other departments will be used up within the 140. So it won't be another hit to your budget.
It won't be an additional hit to the budget.
No, it is, well, it is to roads. It's a
Right.
significant hit to roads. Anyways, I just want to make sure that it's getting adjusted and we get a copy of it.
Okay,
Okay, very good.
thank you.
Thank you, everybody.